The clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, the sporadic bursts of laughter. It was the familiar soundtrack of a typical Thursday night at the Crown and Anchor, a pub that stubbornly held on to its reputation as the last bastion of normalcy in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. Amy despised Thursdays, not because of the pub, which she secretly found rather charming, but because it had been designated as get out of your funk night by her relentlessly optimistic best friend, Jessica. Jessica, a whirlwind of perfectly styled blonde hair and boundless enthusiasm, had decided that Amy's post-breakup hibernation was bordering on pathological. Thus came the forced outings, the blind dates with men who suspiciously resembled stock photo models labeled eligible bachelor, and the endless pep talks about rediscovering her inner goddess. Tonight's remedy? Pub quiz night. Amy absent-mindedly nursed a lukewarm gin and tonic, pretending to care about the geography round, while her mind wandered a million miles away, replaying the all-too-familiar script of her failed relationship with Mark. The meticulously curated Instagram posts, the strained smiles, the slow, painful realization that their love was more performance art than genuine connection. Earth to Amy! Jessica's voice cut through her thoughts as she poked her arm. What's the capital of Burkina Faso? Come on, you used to be great at this. Amy blinked, her focus shifting to the quiz sheet. Ouagadougou, she mumbled, barely registering her own response as she scribbled it down. See? You've still got it. Now stop moping and try to actually enjoy yourself, Jessica chirped, already scanning the room for potential networking opportunities. And then she saw him. Across the crowded room, amidst the boisterous groups huddled around tables, sat a man who defied every conventional standard of attractiveness. He was slightly overweight, with a receding hairline that only accentuated his slightly protruding ears. But it was his smile, a crooked, lopsided grin that seemed to challenge the very laws of symmetry, that caught her attention. He was surrounded by friends, all of them erupting into laughter at something he had said. There was an effortless joy in his demeanor, a genuine warmth that radiated outward, pulling her in like a moth to a flame. Who's that? The words left Amy's lips before she even realized she was speaking. Jessica followed her gaze. Oh, that's Peter. He's a regular here. Works at the post office, I think. Nice guy, but not exactly your type, is he? She said, glancing over Amy's shoulder as if hoping someone more exciting would walk through the door. Amy, dressed to the nines, her hair and makeup flawlessly done, wearing heels that likely cost more than Peter made in a week, found herself at a loss for words. She shrugged, feigning indifference. Just curious. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the pull, the feeling that there was something different about him. As the quiz progressed, Amy found herself stealing glances at Peter. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't peacocking or dominating the conversation. He was simply present, genuinely engaged, and effortlessly funny. The more she observed him, the more she realized that the qualities she had once valued, the sculpted abs, the designer clothes, the high-powered careers, felt hollow and superficial in comparison to the quiet, unpretentious warmth radiating from this unassuming mailman. At the end of the night, while Jessica was busy exchanging numbers with a man who claimed to be a crypto entrepreneur, Amy found herself standing near Peter's table. Hey, she said, feeling a surge of unexpected nervousness. I couldn't help but notice you guys were having a lot of fun. You must be pretty good at the quiz. Peter looked up, his crooked smile widening as he met her gaze. We try, he said with a self-deprecating shrug. Although, our knowledge of obscure 80s sitcoms is definitely our strength. Amy laughed, the sound light and genuine. Well, good luck with the next round, she said, turning to leave, suddenly self-conscious about her own meticulously crafted appearance. Wait, Peter called out. What's your name? Amy, she replied, turning back, her heart doing a little flutter. I'm Peter, he said, extending a hand. His grip was warm and surprisingly firm. Maybe you could join us next week? We could use some reinforcements. Amy hesitated, her mind racing. Was she really considering spending another Thursday night with a group of pub trivia enthusiasts, led by a slightly overweight mailman with a crooked smile? The old Amy would have scoffed at the idea. But the new Amy, the Amy who was slowly shedding the layers of superficiality and expectation, found herself saying, I might just do that. Amy did, in fact, joined Peter and his friends the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and the Thursday after that. Slowly, tentatively, she found herself drawn into their world of obscure facts, silly jokes, and genuine camaraderie. Peter, she discovered, was even more remarkable than she had initially thought. He had a knack for storytelling, weaving intricate tales from the seemingly mundane events of his daily mail route. He could impersonate the eccentric residents of his neighborhood with uncanny accuracy, capturing their quirks and personalities with a warmth and humor that was both endearing and insightful. He was also surprisingly well-read, with a passion for history and a deep appreciation for classic literature. He could quote Shakespeare and recite obscure historical trivia with equal ease, often surprising Amy with his depth of knowledge. More importantly, Peter saw her. Not the curated version of herself that she presented on social media, but the real Amy, the insecure, vulnerable woman beneath the layers of makeup and designer clothes. He didn't try to change her, didn't attempt to mold her into some idealized version of a partner. He simply accepted her, flaws and all, with a quiet, unwavering affection that she found both comforting and liberating. Their dates weren't extravagant. They involved board games, takeout pizza, and long walks in the park. He made her laugh, he made her think, and most importantly, he made her feel genuinely seen. It was a world away from the carefully orchestrated romance she had experienced with Mark, but it was real. It was honest. It was home. One rainy Saturday afternoon, as they were huddled together on the couch, binge-watching a cheesy 80s movie, Peter turned to her, his crooked smile softening his features. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd meet someone like you. Someone who actually appreciates my terrible jokes and my encyclopedic knowledge of obscure historical facts." Amy leaned into him, her heart swelling with affection. "And I never thought I'd fall for a mailman with a crooked smile and a questionable fashion sense." Peter laughed, wrapping his arms around her. "Questionable? I'll have you know this polo shirt is a vintage classic." Amy shook her head, smiling. "That's what I love about you, Peter. You don't try to be something you're not. You're just you." "And what about you, Amy?" Peter asked gently, cupping her face in his hands. "Who are you really? Underneath all the stuff?" Amy hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. It was a question she had been avoiding for a long time, a question that forced her to confront the carefully constructed facade she had built around herself. I'm trying to figure that out," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to be someone better." Peter smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "You're already pretty great, Amy. Just be yourself. That's all anyone can ask for." The proposal, as Amy had recounted, was decidedly ungrand. No elaborate restaurant, no flash mob, no dramatic declarations of love. Just Peter, on one knee in her living room, holding a velvet box containing a simple diamond ring that he had pulled from a Monopoly box. "Amy," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you laugh, annoying you with my terrible jokes, and reminding you that you're amazing just the way you are?" Amy's eyes welled up with tears, a mix of joy, relief, and a touch of disappointment. The old Amy, the one who still clung to the fantasy of a perfect life, couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret that her proposal wasn't more spectacular. But the new Amy, the one learning to value genuine affection over manufactured romance, pushed those thoughts aside. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. "Yes, 1,000,000 times yes." The wedding planning, however, proved to be a minefield. Amy, fueled by years of Pinterest boards and bridal magazines, had a very specific vision of what her perfect day should look like. A lavish venue, a designer dress, a gourmet menu, a string quartet, the whole 9 yards. Peter, ever the pragmatist, gently tried to steer her toward a more budget-friendly option. "Amy," he said one evening, poring over a spreadsheet filled with estimated wedding costs, "we could put a down payment on a house with this kind of money." Amy bristled, her carefully cultivated sense of romance feeling threatened. "Peter, this is my wedding. It's supposed to be the most magical day of my life. I deserve to have the wedding I've always dreamed of." "And what about our future?" Peter countered, his voice tinged with frustration. "Don't we deserve to start our marriage on solid financial ground?" Amy waved his concerns aside. "We'll figure it out," she said airily. "I'll find ways to save money." Besides, it's not like we're talking about millions of dollars. But Amy's ways to save money involved opening a new credit card, maxing out another, and conveniently forgetting to mention certain expenses to Peter. She justified her actions by telling herself that she deserved this, that she had worked hard and earned the right to have the wedding of her dreams. She buried her guilt beneath layers of denial and rationalization. The wedding, while beautiful, was a financial strain. Amy's credit cards were now swimming in debt, and Peter was starting to ask questions. "Amy," he said one evening, his brow furrowed as he stared at a credit card statement. "What's this charge for $500 at Bridal Bliss Boutique?" Amy stammered, scrambling for an explanation. "Oh, that was, a discount on the flowers. I got a really good deal." Peter looked at her skeptically. $500 for a discount? That doesn't sound right. Amy's temper flared. "Are you accusing me of lying?" Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm just asking questions, Amy. I want to understand where our money is going. It's going toward making our wedding beautiful," Amy retorted, her voice rising. "Is that such a crime?" Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "No," he said quietly, "but lying to me about it is." The debt was a persistent shadow over their marriage, a constant source of tension and resentment. Peter became increasingly frugal, scrutinizing every purchase, clipping coupons and turning off lights. Amy, in turn, felt increasingly suffocated, resentful of his stinginess and his inability to understand her need for nice things. His family did not make matters better. Sarah, Peter's sister, was particularly irksome. Sarah's financial questions always hit Amy in a sore spot. The family meals started to feel like a trial. Every bite Amy ate felt monitored, assessed, and somehow judged insufficient. It felt like she was constantly on display, her every word and deed analyzed and scrutinized. It was not her family's way. Amy's trips to the mall felt like strategic exercises. She'd circle the parking lot several times, making sure Peter wasn't following. She'd pay in cash when she could, avoiding the paper trail. But the guilt still clung to her like a cheap perfume, a constant reminder of her dishonesty. "Why do you keep buying clothes? Your closet is already overflowing," Peter said one day. "Well, not all of us can be content with the same 3 polo shirts for every occasion," Amy retorted, instantly regretting her words. Peter's face fell. He knew she was referring to his lack of style, his unfashionable clothes. He could afford designer clothes, but he didn't prioritize them the way Amy did. As Amy became more and more distant, the lies grew more frequent. They covered shopping trips, dinners with her friends, and even a weekend getaway with Jessica. It was easier to lie than to face Peter's disappointment, his quiet disapproval. "Where were you last night?" Peter asked one Sunday. "I told you," Amy said, averting her gaze. "I was at a teacher's workshop." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Jessica told me she saw you at the mall. She said you bought a new bag." Amy swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "Okay, fine. I went to the mall. Is that so wrong? I needed a new bag." "You lied to me, Amy." "Again," Peter said, looking hurt. The arguments became more frequent, more heated, more personal. They chipped away at the foundation of their marriage, eroding the trust and affection that had once bound them together. "I don't even recognize you anymore," Peter said one night, his voice filled with despair. "You've become obsessed with things, with appearances. What happened to the girl I fell in love with?" Amy didn't have an answer. She didn't know what had happened to that girl. She was lost, buried beneath layers of debt, deceit, and a desperate desire to maintain the illusion of a perfect life. The credit card statements, as she described, were the final straw. Peter discovered the full extent of her debt, the years of lies and hidden spending. The disappointment on his face was almost unbearable. "Why, Amy? Why did you do this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amy, cornered and ashamed, did what she always did. She lashed out. "Maybe if you weren't so controlling with money, I wouldn't have to hide things," she said, the words spilling out like venom. Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Controlling? I was trying to protect us. I was trying to build a future for us." "A future where we live like paupers?" Amy sneered, instantly regretting her words. "A future where we're honest with each other," Peter said, his voice trembling. "A future where we can trust each other." "Trust? You want to talk about trust?" Amy retorted, seizing on the opportunity to deflect. What about your family? They're always judging me, criticizing me. They think I'm not good enough for you. Peter looked at her, his face etched with disbelief. My family loves you, Amy. They're just concerned about us. Concerned about me spending all your money, Amy shrieked. It's our money, Amy. And you've been spending it behind my back, lying to me, and destroying our future. Peter yelled back. The fight escalated, fueled by years of pent-up resentment and unmet expectations. So Amy said things she didn't mean, things that cut deep and left lasting scars. And then, at that fateful dinner at Peter's parents' house, she uttered the words that sealed their fate. Words she could never take back, words that would haunt her for years to come. I don't even need you, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. Look at you. I could have had anyone, but I settled for you. You're not even that funny. You're just ugly. The room went silent, the air thick with shock and disbelief. Amy stood there, swaying slightly, the weight of her words crushing her. Peter, his face pale and drawn, simply stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked out. The days that followed were a blur of regret, denial, and desperate attempts to salvage the wreckage of her marriage. Amy called Peter relentlessly, leaving tearful voicemails, begging him to forgive her. She sent frantic text messages, promising to change, to be better, to be the woman he deserved. She drove by his parents' house, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but his car was never there. She talked to Jessica, recounting her version of events, trying to paint herself as the victim, the wronged wife. But it was no use. Peter had made up his mind. He had reached his breaking point. He was done. The divorce was swift and brutal. The lawyers handled the details, dividing their assets, severing their ties. Amy was left with a mountain of debt, a tarnished reputation, and a gnawing sense of emptiness. Her friends began to drift away. The couples they used to socialize with suddenly became too busy. The single friends, the ones who had once envied her seemingly perfect life, now avoided her gaze, sensing the instability and the desperation that clung to her like a shroud. Jessica, her closest confidant, also began to distance herself. The shopping sprees dwindled, the lunches became less frequent, and the conversations grew strained and awkward. Amy, Jessica said one afternoon, as they were sipping coffee at a cafe, I'm worried about you. You're not yourself. You need to get help. Amy bristled, defensive as always. Help? I don't need help. I'm fine. No, you're not, Jessica said firmly. You're spending too much money, you're alienating your friends, and you're still clinging to this fantasy of a perfect life that doesn't exist. Amy stared at her, stunned. How can you say that? You're supposed to be my friend. I am your friend, Jessica said softly. And that's why I'm telling you the truth. You're spiraling out of control, Amy. You need to stop before you destroy everything. Amy stormed out of the cafe, her heart filled with anger and resentment. She couldn't believe Jessica was turning against her. She was alone, adrift in a sea of debt, disappointment, and shattered dreams. The apartment, once a symbol of her independence and success, now felt like a prison. It was too quiet, too empty, too filled with the ghosts of her past. The designer clothes, the expensive furniture, the carefully curated decor, they were all just empty shells, reminders of the life she had lost, the life she had destroyed. Amy spent her days scrolling through social media, comparing herself to the seemingly perfect lives of others. She saw pictures of Peter, smiling and happy, with his new girlfriend. She saw pictures of her friends, enjoying lavish vacations, celebrating milestones, and living the life she had once craved. The contrast was excruciating. She felt like she was trapped in a parallel universe, a world where everyone else was thriving while she was slowly sinking. She tried to maintain the illusion of success, posting carefully staged photos of her apartment, writing upbeat captions about finding her inner peace and living her best life. But the truth was, she was barely scraping by. The credit card payments were overwhelming, the rent was a constant struggle, and the ramen noodles had become a staple of her diet. She had sold most of her designer bags to pay the bills, sacrificing her prized possessions for the sake of survival. One evening, as she was sitting alone in her apartment, eating ramen noodles and scrolling through social media, she broke down. The tears flowed freely, a torrent of grief, regret, and self-loathing. She had lost everything: her husband, her friends, her reputation, and her carefully constructed illusion of a perfect life. She was alone, broke, and utterly miserable. And it was all her fault. The grocery store, the cheap one across town, was a symbol of her downfall. It was a place she had once avoided, a place she associated with poverty and desperation. Now, it was her regular haunt, a place where she could stretch her meager budget and avoid the judgment of the wealthier patrons at the upscale supermarket near her apartment. That's where she saw them, Peter and a woman she didn't recognize. A woman who was the antithesis of everything Amy had ever strived to be. She was simply dressed, her hair pulled back in a no-fuss ponytail, her face free of makeup. But there was a warmth and radiance about her, a genuine joy that shone from within. They were laughing together, their eyes locked in a gaze of pure affection. Peter, his crooked smile wider than Amy had ever seen it, looked genuinely happy. Amy, hiding behind a display of cereal boxes, felt a pang of jealousy so sharp and intense that it stole her breath away. She couldn't bear to watch them, to witness their happiness. She fled the store, tears streaming down her face, her heart aching with a pain she couldn't describe. That night, consumed by a morbid curiosity, she did some online sleuthing. She discovered that Peter's new girlfriend, Sarah, the irony wasn't lost on her, was a cashier at the grocery store where they had met. She lived in a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of town. But instead of dragging Peter down, as Amy had always feared would happen to her, she had lifted him up. She had encouraged him to pursue his dreams, to apply for the route supervisor position he had always wanted. She had celebrated his successes, no matter how small, with genuine enthusiasm. Amy also discovered that Sarah had enrolled in community college with Peter's support and encouragement. She was working towards a degree in accounting, a career that would provide her with a stable and fulfilling future. They had moved in together, transforming their tiny apartment into a cozy and loving home. They cooked meals together, played board games, and spent their evenings curled up on the couch, reading books and watching movies. They were living a simple, ordinary life. But it was a life filled with love, laughter, and genuine connection. It was everything Amy had once craved, everything she had thrown away in her pursuit of perfection. The final blow came when Amy saw a picture of Sarah wearing an engagement ring. It was a small, unassuming ring, likely costing far less than the extravagant diamond Amy had demanded. But in Sarah's eyes, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She looked at it with a joy and gratitude that Amy had never felt for her own expensive bauble. Amy realized, with a crushing sense of clarity, that she had made a terrible mistake. She had chased a fantasy, sacrificing genuine happiness for the sake of appearances. She had thrown away a good man, a loving relationship, for the sake of a lie. The months that followed were a long and agonizing journey of self-reflection. Amy finally confronted her demons, her insecurities, and her unhealthy obsession with perfection. She sought therapy, pouring out her heart to a kind and understanding therapist who helped her unravel the tangled mess of her past. She learned to identify her triggers, challenge her negative thought patterns, and develop healthier coping mechanisms. She also began to take responsibility for her actions, acknowledging the pain she had caused Peter and the damage she had inflicted on herself. She cut up her credit cards, vowed to live within her means, and started prioritizing genuine connection over material possessions. She volunteered at a local soup kitchen, finding a sense of purpose and fulfillment in helping others. She even reached out to Peter's mother, offering a sincere apology for her behavior. Peter's mother, though still hurt, accepted her apology with grace and understanding. "Amy," she said softly, "Peter is a good man. He deserves to be happy." Amy nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know I messed up. It's never too late to learn from your mistakes, dear," Peter's mother said gently. "Just don't make the same ones again." Amy never tried to contact Peter directly. She knew she had forfeited that right. She simply hoped that he could find happiness with Sarah, that he could have the life she had denied him. She focused on rebuilding her own life, piece by piece. She found a new job, teaching underprivileged children in a struggling neighborhood. She made new friends, people who valued her for who she was, not for what she had. She even started to rediscover her own passions, the things she had abandoned in her pursuit of a perfect life. She took up painting, finding solace and expression in the vibrant colors and swirling brushstrokes. She started to write again, journaling her thoughts and feelings, exploring her inner world. Slowly, gradually, she began to heal. She started to forgive herself, accept her imperfections, and embrace the beauty of the ordinary. Years passed. Amy rebuilt her life, creating a quiet, fulfilling existence centered around her work, her friends, and her art. She never forgot Peter, never stopped regretting the pain she had caused him. But she learned to live with her regret, to use it as a reminder to stay true to herself, to value genuine connection, and to appreciate the simple joys of life. One day, while browsing through a local art gallery, she saw a painting that caught her eye. It was a portrait of a man with a crooked smile, his eyes filled with warmth and kindness. The artist was listed as Sarah Miller. Amy stood there, transfixed by the painting, feeling a strange mix of emotions: admiration, sadness, and a flicker of hope. She approached the gallery owner, inquiring about the artist. Sarah Miller is a local artist, the owner said with a smile. She's very talented, and her husband, Peter, is her biggest supporter. Amy nodded, her heart aching with a familiar pang. They're a lovely couple, the owner continued. They have a little boy now, a real charmer. He has his father's smile. Amy's eyes welled up with tears. His father's smile, she repeated softly. Yes, the owner said, mistaking her emotion for admiration. It's a very distinctive smile, very endearing. Amy smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Yes, she said, it is. She bought the painting. It was expensive, far more than she could comfortably afford. But she didn't care. It was worth every penny. She hung it in her apartment, in a prominent place where she could see it every day. It was a reminder of her past, a reminder of her mistakes, and a reminder of the importance of cherishing what truly matters. Amy never remarried. She never found another love that compared to the genuine connection she had shared with Peter. But she found happiness in her own way, in her work, her art, and her friendships. She learned to embrace the imperfections of life, to find beauty in the ordinary, and to appreciate the simple joys that had once escaped her notice. She learned that perfection is an illusion, a fleeting and unattainable goal that can lead to nothing but disappointment and unhappiness. She learned that true happiness lies in authenticity, in genuine connection, and in embracing the crooked smiles and imperfect moments that make life so beautiful. And sometimes, late at night, when she looked at the painting of Peter with his crooked smile, she would allow herself to wonder what might have been. But she wouldn't dwell on the past. She would simply smile, grateful for the lessons she had learned, and hopeful for the future, whatever it may hold. Because she knew, deep down, that even though she had lost him, she had finally found herself. And that, in the end, was enough.